Hey everybody, welcome back to Sophisticakes by Mary. So a couple weeks ago I did 3 white wedding cakes. 3 different wedding cakes. They were all different versions of a white wedding cake with different textures. And I did record all of those. But we're going to start with this one. This cake featured a spatula technique, horizontal texture, and also how to add a tier that is foam in with a tiered wedding cake. So if this sounds like something that sounds interesting to you, stick around and we'll get to it right after the intro. So this cake was real cake on the top tier and the bottom tier. The middle tier was artificial cake foam dummy. So I have had a few comments made about when I use foam instead of a real cake to decorate, to show a decorating technique, and there's 2 reasons to do that. One reason is that I sometimes don't have the time to actually bake the cake, and it's the same techniques just applied to real cake versus a foam cake dummy. Another reason to use it would be to add some more height to a tier when you don't need as much cake. So that's what we did for this one. And this one for the real cake section was chocolate chip cookie dough cake with a edible chocolate chip cookie filling. So that is super yummy. That's one of our most popular flavors, and I have to say I understand why. So for this bottom tier, actually I started with buttercream underneath the cookie dough filling with a thickened dam around it, and then I realized, do the cookie dough first and then do a layer of buttercream on top of that. So that's what I did for the rest of this. It's a lot easier to spread this cookie dough filling on cake instead of on soft buttercream. So I did this throughout the entire cake. And a thickened dam means basically it's the regular American buttercream that I use, that I will put a link on here for the video on how I make that, with just some added powdered sugar so that it's thicker and it holds your filling in better. Now I'm just adding a crumb coat to lock in those crumbs. And before I did the crumb coat, I went back in and I piped in a little bit more of that thickened buttercream in where there's any gaps in between the layers of cake, just as a reassurance. So with the crumb coat, you just go ahead and smooth it pretty good and get the excess off. Stick it in your refrigerator for 20 minutes or your freezer for 10 minutes until it is solidified and dry to the touch when you touch it. And then you can do your first full coat of buttercream. And I'm just doing the exact same thing for the top tier. Now this is where I am getting the middle tier, which is an 8-inch tier, ready to be buttercreamed. And I just go ahead and I put this on a regular cake board with some hot glue. And then I use some tape that is rolled up underneath of the foam cake and stick it to a board. It's just like a working surface that I like to use. And I start with the sides. Add your buttercream to the sides first, because since this is light, it's made out of foam, it wants to move around a lot. So it's a little easier, I find, to go ahead and ice the sides while holding on to the top. And what that does is you're able to move it without it kind of scooching around and getting out of your reach. And also you can add some weight to it by adding it to the sides first, and it's a little easier to do the top. It kind of holds itself down a little bit better. Now I'm just going to add some to the top. Now you just treat it like a regular cake at this point. And this is the first coat on this. I do go back and do another one. Typically I always do 2 coats at least. And then this is a cake drum. I am doubling it up when we do a taller cake, especially if it's a heavier cake. This one's not necessarily so much heavy, but we double up the cake drums so that they can handle the weight better. Now this is going to be my first full coat of buttercream on the bottom tier, which I should tell you the top tier is a 6-inch, the middle tier is an 8-inch, and the bottom tier is a 10-inch. And we typically do 3 layers of cake and 2 layers of filling in each cake. I'm using a piping bag to apply the buttercream this time. You don't have to. It's kind of a time saver for me. I don't always do it, depends on what all we have going that week. Now for this cake, or this layer, is the horizontal texture that I like to use this scraper for. You can just use your spatula if you want to make it a little more rustic, but we kind of prefer to do this. It's a little cleaner, it looks a little bit more professional. I guess professional is not the word. It's just not as rustic. So if we're doing more of a classic design, we go with this comb versus just using your spatula. And what you do, your first layer of buttercream, and you just kind of get the bulk off, and then you can go in with that scraper. And this is the second tier, the second coat of buttercream on that foam cake dummy. And I like to use the metal scraper to finish it off. It just kind of gives a smoother finish, I find. Now doing the same thing for the top tier. This one's going to have a texture to it also, but I wanted to have a good smooth finished layer of buttercream on it first, because we need to have the good sharp corners and the level sides before we do the texture. Now to get this texture on here, I just use my spatula and I pipe some buttercream on it, on that edge. That way you're not adding too much or too little. You can kind of control more how much is going on. Now I just kind of push on it, let it have a ridge on the back side, and then push on it as you pull it over to the side. It's one of those things that as you do it, you get the feel for it, and it becomes a little easier as you go. Now I kind of decided that it had a few too many straight lines in this texture. So I went back and I kind of roughed up some parts of it. Kind of went back the other direction. So it wasn't as uniform. I wanted it a little bit more rustic, maybe is the word. And here's my trick that I use to figure out where to place your dowels. I use a star cutter. And I push that in the middle. I find them, eyeball where the middle is, push that down, and that marks where the corners of the star is where you're going to put your dowels. Now, I wouldn't do this for a cake that's any bigger than a 10-inch because you need to have them further out towards the edge. And unless you have a really big star cutter, it's a little too small for that. You could use it as a starting point and then go in and put some in between those 5 dowels. If you wanted to more towards the outside edge, you could do that too. Now after I mark the dowels, I cut them all the same size. I use one and hold it up against the next dowel and mark where that one needs to be cut. So you know that if all your dowels are the same height, then that means the cake you're putting on top of those dowels is going to be level. And if there's any sides, any parts that aren't exactly level, you can go in with buttercream and fill in. Like this one, you can tell on that left-hand side a little bit, there's a little bit more of a gap. That just means that the cake below it is just not exactly level on the top. But I can go back in and add a little buttercream dam, and you'll see me do that. It's more like caulking, I guess. And then I just add some more buttercream on top of the foam dummy because you don't need to add any dowels because it's not real cake. So you can just place it right on top. And there I just piped in some buttercream in between them. And then on the first bottom part, I just used my scraper to level that out, pull off or scrape off the extra. On the top, since there's texture, I'm using a brush that I have dipped in water to get the extra off. So there you go, guys. A 3-tiered white wedding cake with 3 different textures on each tier. And then there is the cake at the venue with some flowers added to finish it off and a topper. I thought this wedding was gorgeous, and I hope you like what you saw. If you did, please like, subscribe, share, hit the notification bell, do all the things as always, and we'll catch you in the next one. Thanks, guys. Bye.